This November, Americans will see two names at the top of their ballot for the presidential election. But who decides what those two names will be? Turns out it's a shockingly small share of the American public. In most election years, just 20% of American adults cast a primary ballot, while more than half usually vote in the general election. You don't go vote in a primary unless you are really, unusually, weirdly into American politics.
Traditionally, primary voters tend to be older, more well-educated, and stronger partisans than your general election voters.
And this means primary voters don't represent most Americans, and maybe don't make the choices that most Americans would make. For instance, 62% of Republican voters who identified with the Tea Party said that they always vote in primary elections, compared to just 45% of non-Tea Party Republicans. And only around 10% of people under 30 typically show up to vote in the primaries. But it's not just laziness and apathy. There are a couple good reasons why turnout is so low. For one thing, 16 states have closed primaries, meaning you can only vote if you're a registered Republican or Democrat. And that's a problem because these days, more and more Americans are calling themselves independents. But there's another big reason why many people don't vote in primaries. It's because they know it won't matter. The states with primaries early in the year have the greatest influence on the eventual outcome. And by the time Super Tuesday is over, the nomination is often a done deal.
I mean, it is rational. If you're in California and it's June and somebody won the magic number in April, you can see why people don't vote.
Super Tuesday began in 1988, and since then, primary turnout has been falling, with the exception of the historic and competitive 2008 Democratic primary. Because the early states generate momentum and tons of media attention, candidates tend to focus on voters in Iowa and New Hampshire, responding to their concerns and making them promises. These are two states that are a lot more rural than the American population is. They're also much less diverse. Black and Hispanic residents make up a much smaller share of the populations of Iowa and New Hampshire compared to the country as a whole.
And that is why several years ago, the Democrats led the way in adding two early states, South Carolina and Nevada.
If a lot of our votes don't matter, the ones that do should at least resemble the diversity of the American public.